Welcome to Preparing for AI, the AI podcast for everybody, with your hosts Jimmy Rhodes and me, Matt Cartwright. We explore the human and social impacts of AI, looking at the impact on jobs, AI and sustainability, and most importantly, the urgent need for safe development of AI, governance and alignment. Bullets for your brain today, but we'll forget it all again. Monuments put from pen to paper turns me into a gutless wonder. And if you tolerate this, then your children will be next. Welcome to Preparing for AI with me, Matt Cartwright.
And me, Jimmy Rhodes. So today's episode is I don't know if it's so much an emergency podcast, but a very topical one. So today we're going to be talking a bit about deepfakes and the potential impact on elections. A recent Channel 4 Dispatches investigation, which you may have seen, titled "Can I Steal Your Vote?" just released, and it's brought the potential impact of AI on elections into sharp focus. The programme, produced by Kalel Productions, conducted a revealing experiment where AI-generated content was used to influence a group of 25 voters over 2 weeks. The producers created deepfake videos of political leaders announcing fake policies and AI-generated hot mic moments, testing how these fabricated pieces of content could sway voter opinions. Alarmingly, by the end of the experiment, 23 out of 25 participants said they would vote in line with the AI-influenced direction. The eye-opening investigation demonstrates the power of AI-generated content in potentially manipulating voter behaviour, obviously topical with an election just having happened in the UK and elections all over the world about to happen. It raises critical questions about the integrity of democratic processes in the age of artificial intelligence and highlights the urgent need for awareness and safeguards against AI-driven electoral manipulation. Today, we're going to delve deeper into this topic. We'll explore the implications of such AI capabilities, discuss possible policy responses, and consider what election officials, candidates, and voters can do to navigate this new landscape.
I guess we don't know, we should probably say to start with, we don't know if the group in this show necessarily reflects the kind of UK public. But I mean, first impression for me was that there was so little kind of understanding of AI and therefore, you know, how much impact it kind of had. And we get back to this point so many times, but I think we on the podcast and with maybe the people that we kind of hang around with have this idea that not that everybody is, you know, reading about AI every second, but that they have probably a higher level of understanding and an awareness of what AI can do at this point than maybe they do. I read something earlier today actually about how some of the kind of stupid or, I mean, let's say novel uses of AI, for example, generating images and music, etc., has taken the focus off some of the harms because it kind of seems trivial and silly. And a lot of those uses, people think, oh, well, if that's all it's doing, you know, if it's just making stupid jokes up or it's just creating images or it's just, you know, giving me false answers, actually how dangerous can it be? And I don't know if that has had a kind of effect on, you know, the general public's perceptions of AI. I think maybe before we sort of go into detail on the point in general, just to explain that the premise of the show. Now, if you're in the UK, you can probably watch this on Channel 4 or on YouTube. I actually tried to watch it on YouTube and I had a US VPN on, so I actually couldn't view it at first. I had to switch it back off. So if you've got a VPN, you'll need to switch it, I think, over to the UK if you're not in the UK to watch it. But the premise of the show, just to expand on what Jimmy said really, is they created an app, a fake kind of app called Echo, and gave this to everyone on the show. And this app was, you know, filled with kind of, I guess it looked like one of those kind of, collating together different social media. So videos, images, comments, etc., that looked like a kind of combination of social media apps. And they were trying to push the voters to vote for either Labour or Conservative through the content they would feed them. And, you know, I would recommend watch it if you get the chance to do it. It's really interesting. They had deepfake videos showing Rishi Sunak, who's the current Prime Minister in the UK, announcing that he's raising the state pension age to 70. And then the most controversial one, I guess, was a £35 charge to see a GP in the UK, which had everybody in this kind of shocked and angry and of course, he's got his own healthcare. And then Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, was shown on a deepfake saying he was going to ban the song "Land of Hope and Glory," which would appeal to a certain demographic as well. I think for listeners outside the UK, you might be shocked at how unacceptable the idea of paying $50 or 400 Chinese RMB would be for a GP's appointment. But to a Brit, the NHS is kind of the foundation of, I think, of what people are proud of about the UK. And so this idea of paying to see a general practitioner is a massive deal. And it seemed to push everybody who watched it, and that was the people they were trying to push towards Labour. It pushed almost all of them away from the Conservative Party. Like Jimmy said at the beginning, 23 of the 25 people were, essentially manipulated by AI. It was a really good deepfake creation. I mean, I did a bit of messing around with HeyGen a few months ago, and this is only using a set of set avatars, but I could feed it a script, and a fairly realistic character would then recite the script, and that kind of took me 10 minutes of my own time to do it. There was one where Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, was claiming he was going to put immigrants at the top of the house waiting list in the UK, and that basically put all the voters off in the other group. So I think what shocked me about it was changing one sentence about one issue that was well targeted was literally enough to potentially decide where someone was going to vote. So of all the stuff they had on that, the app and the information they were feeding them, actually from, I would say 80% of them, it was one particular comment, either the £35 NHS charge or this putting immigrants at the top of housing waiting list. That was enough to send people over. And, this targeting, and it's where the algorithm comes in, of course. And let's remember that, China, for example, is really, really good in advanced algorithms. It's the focus of their regulatory effects on AI. So, some of the syncing was not great on all of the sort of deep fakes that they showed, but the ones that they did for Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak were excellent. I mean, they were really, really believable. And, even the poorer ones, all you need is slightly poor eyesight or a small screen or, an elderly person who doesn't understand how realistic these videos can be. And it was incredibly easy to manipulate these voters.
And I think that's the point, isn't it? If you're even if you're aware of AI, you could easily watch one of those videos and not realize that it's AI. If you're not aware of AI at all, then you would have no reason to doubt it. You would have no reason to doubt it. I mean, sometimes your TV goes out of sync anyway, like the lip sync goes out of sync on your TV anyway when you're watching TV. It's not like that happens anyway. So, and just to go back a bit, I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, even 10 years ago, there was talk of election interference. When Trump got into power, there was talk of Russian interference in the election. I mean, that's actually proven to have happened now. I think the difference now is back then it was, social media posts and sort of nudging here and there on social media posts, which also potentially works and works. But now you've literally got the ability to put anything in the mouths of anyone, and it's getting better and better. And another thing, I mean, it's not necessarily deepfake related, but literally in the last kind of week, Runway Gen 3's just come out, which is another iteration of video development, which is similar to Sora by ChatGPT. And so these capabilities are improving. This isn't a news episode in terms of that, but like it's relevant. It's a relevant topical sort of update on AI, and these things are improving all the time. And this Channel 4 documentary, I mean, it was a good thing. It's definitely a bit of an eye opener. It's a good thing because I think it's taking it to a wider audience. There's probably a significant amount of the Channel 4 audience that don't know very much about AI or sort of aren't on the topic, up to speed on the topic. So I think it was a good documentary, well worth watching. We'll link it in the show notes. This really needs a bit of awareness around it.
I think just basically it showed that you just need to kind of hit people's fears, don't you? It's, that's the way you target it, is you hit people's fears, which, for most people in the world, immigrants, unfortunately, are a target. I mean, in the UK, we know the NHS is going to be a point that really gets people's goat. I don't know how far we're down the rabbit hole already. I mean, you've said this many times about how it's not just about AI. This has been here for a while. I mean, I've admitted that I myself have been really struggling for several months now with what to believe. And I've seen so many, so-called conspiracy theories, and the thing is, some of them are obviously true, I'm sure of that. The problem is they can't all be true because they contradict each other. But I mean, man, there's some strong evidence out there, and that's the problem. Is what is evidence now? Previously you would look at. A friend of mine was talking about how Elsevier are, I hope I pronounced that right, one of the big scientific journal organizations is creating a kind of LLM that will have all their information. They're like, oh, this is great because we're credible, and there's no fake information in there. Well, isn't there? Yeah, how do we know they're not real? I mean, how do you evidence something? I think in the past we all believed that scientific papers, peer-reviewed scientific papers were true. Well, an AI can presumably create a scientific paper or can help you to peer review a scientific paper. And so, there's evidence for everything. And I think this deepfake is a perfect example of, I could quite easily say, well, I saw evidence that Keir Starmer said that. I saw evidence that Rishi Sunak said it. Evidence now is not necessarily believable. And we're in a post-truth world, but we're almost at the point of a world in which it's post-truth. It's kind of, there's nothing left anymore. And I can see the same comments everywhere. You if you look at enough things, you think, hang on, I'm sure I've seen that comment somewhere else, and you realize you're onto a different conspiracy theory or a different, let's not call them conspiracy theories, let's call them theories. You're onto a different theory, and you notice the same comment, and then you think, hang on, I think that avatar was the same, and you realize it's the same avatar and the same named accounts, or the accounts which have been auto-generated with Steve Phillips 37X52691, which obviously no one would name their account. And I think I'm struggling with it, but I know it's a problem, and therefore I think I'm just about able to see through it. But how do people who don't have that level of awareness or are not able to, rationalize it for whatever reason, how are they expected to see through this when you've got, like I say, a level of evidence which it's staring you in the face. You can see it, and it looks 100% or 99% real, right? It's frightening, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading a little bit about this and like today, and one of the things that was mentioned on an article that I was looking at was that actually when these things have happened in the past, mainstream media have quite often dismantled them pretty quickly. So they've actually the mainstream media's kind of put it out there that this is not real. They've fact checked it, all the rest of it. So there's a couple of things there. Like one is what will be interesting for me is when is the first one of these going to get past the mainstream media, so to speak? Because obviously the Channel 4 documentary was more of a documentary. It was illustrative. It was trying to open people's eyes to this. But I'd be interested to know if any of these have actually ever got past mainstream media and when that's happened. And the other thing this article mentions...
Do you trust mainstream media, Jimmy? Because... what is mainstream media? And whether you do or not, I mean, we had an episode with Dan Lyons a few weeks ago. We talked about trust. I think one of the problems is there isn't trust in mainstream media. So, even the kind of fact checks, and, that's another example. The fact checking websites, they've got their own agenda. So do we believe the fact checking websites? If you believe the theory, you think the fact checking website is the kind of conspiracy. So it's a tangled web of, when you're saying about getting past the mainstream media, getting past which mainstream media, because they don't all have the same agenda anyway, do they?
They don't all have the same agenda. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue with that. Like, everyone has their own agenda. I think there are certain things, there are certain outlets that I do trust, and up to now anyway, and I think everyone has that. I don't know whether I'll lose that in the future.
You have to find your sources. I think that's exactly where we're heading. Is you're going to have to take a leap of faith and say that's the source I'm going to trust. But that in itself pushes you to one extreme, because it means you end up in the echo chamber to some degree.
Yeah, and I mean, the other interesting thing this article said, which is, with the really big stuff, like with the sort of thing we were watching in the Channel 4 documentary, things like Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, it's gonna have a lot of focus on it, and so they're probably gonna get identified. But this article says, what about in lower profile races? As this gets easier and easier, what about in lower profile stuff that isn't in the media spotlight, where you could actually be nudging swing states in like smaller rural places, and you could sort of have this I don't know what you'd call it, but like you could kind of you could nudge a few swing states in one direction,
Yeah.
kind of under cover of darkness almost, where like there's not much
Nudging is
media.
spot on as a term. Nudging is
Yeah.
exactly spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's all this kind of thing where, especially as this gets easier and easier and anyone can do it, how much media coverage are you going to need to kind of expose all of these different deepfakes, all of these different potential potential fakes basically. And so I don't know, I'm genuinely getting to the point where it's like, I agree with you, can you trust anything that you see online? I think a lot of people talk about that, but when you see something, when you see Keir Starmer say something, or Rishi Sunak, at the moment you kind of believe it. In the future, who knows? Like if you see Rishi outside Number 10 making an announcement, is it real? Has the election actually been called?
Has it even happened? Yeah. There were actually before we'll come back to the UK one, but there were already reports earlier this year with the Indian election actually about deepfakes, and some of it was pretty funny. There was Modi dancing on stage at a kind of Glastonbury style music festival, and there was a weird one. It was a dead ex-politician's. He was supporting his son's election bid, and they'd regened him back from the dead to support his son's election campaign. But the one that was really interesting I saw on YouTube was they'd created multiple deep fakes of an NBC news reporter in English and Hindi and various other language, and they literally cloned the original video, and then just replicated it over different videos with different languages and messages. I mean, they did this in the studio; it was professionally done, but it was an hour or so, and then they gave them, I think, 3 or 4 hours, and they just created a load of cloned videos with different messages in different languages, all really, really well synced. They put 4 of those videos on YouTube. All of them were accepted and published. So the current checks and balances are obviously not in place.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. I mean, I guess for the last few minutes, because we're not going to do a long episode this time, I guess, do we want to talk a little bit about what people can do in terms of, I don't know, how to kind of combat this, I guess. And it's a bit tricky, I'll be honest. Like, I'm not sure what I plan to do other than, well, for one, continue to be pretty cynical and think critically about everything that I see online.
I think so. I just want to, one other point before we do that. I think that's a great way to end it. But just a little bit wider, because I think it's, this particular show. So watch it. I really say watch it. If you're, obviously the UK election's important. It's important to people like us, but the US election is the big one. And I think getting this kind of stuff out there ahead of November. I mean, at the moment, unfortunately, there don't seem to be any particularly good choices for that election. But that's where the focus is going to be of deepfakes. But I just wanted another kind of anecdotal one. So I saw a deepfake video on their WeChat, the Chinese social media app WeChat, earlier this year, and it was showing Big Ben, or rather the tower that's got Big Ben in it, because Big Ben is the bell, as I'm sure everyone knows. It was labeled as a fake in the article itself, but not on the image that you see in the feed. So when you looked at it, and it was really well circulated, like maybe because I clicked on it once, but I was seeing that from various articles for a couple of days. And I think it was saying it happened on New Year's Eve. I mean, it obviously didn't, and I knew it didn't, but it was a pretty well faked story. And there's been a number of fake Princess Catherine, Kate Middleton recently. Obviously, she's had her cancer diagnosis and was missing for a while. So in China, there was a deepfake video of her announcing that she had been held imprisoned in her home by Prince William, the Prince of Wales. And I had people asking me, Chinese people asking me, what's going on with Kate? What's this thing about, she's been locked away? And this is obviously not something that's state targeted or, backed by a big organization or anything other than, clickbait really. But there's a decision there not to do anything about it. And if you understand anything about the levels of censorship in China, nothing gets through the censors that isn't allowed to get through that censorship. So there's obviously been a conscious decision to let that story, to let it run and let it continue and let it brew in the background. And, we've seen this many times before. Things don't need to be specifically or, developed by a state or an organization or, a terrorist organization or a territory or whatever. They can be created by individuals in a sort of innocent way, but they can still have a purpose that a territory or an organization with power then kind of steers the direction of that content. So I think that's a kind of great example of how something can go viral that's made as a kind of joke and then is allowed or is pushed or nudged, however you want to say it, to then become something more. So, we're talking this election campaign. These are likely to be things that are pushed by, hostile states, terrorist organizations, opposition parties, people with an interest in it. But there's also a kind of sinister, people messing around and then that having a negative effect and then that being used to kind of push that narrative as well. So there are all kinds of levels of this, I think, where it could be really dangerous. It's definitely one of the kind of negative aspects of AI that is here now and that we're really starting to see kind of become part of the fabric of society, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty scary. That's pretty scary, and it's a bit mad that, like you say, you had your friends actually asking you about it and taking it seriously as well. What did you say to them?
The thing is, I mean, I was like, well, we don't know, but that's not what's happened. It's like,
pretty sure that hasn't happened.
But again, it's like, if you believe that, then when she came out and was at the Horse Guards parade for the Trooping of the Colour, the big military parade a few weeks ago, if you believe that, and then she came out and she was seen on the balcony, etc., well, we don't know that was her. That could be the fake. I mean, that's the thing. Once you've set the image and you've got it in people's minds, one of the interesting things from the show today when I watched it back at your sort of recommendation was at the end of it, even though they'd been shown that they were fake, they were still, some of them said that they still felt the anger, even when they'd found out it was fake. It's like the synapses in the brain had already been rewired. And it's difficult, even though you're fake, you're still like, oh, but I was angry about something about them. You've already kind of changed your mind. So it's like the whole kind of, guilt until you're proven innocent in society now, isn't it? Someone suspended from a school on a claim that they've, abused or punched a kid or whatever, and it's proven they haven't, but the damage was done. So with these deepfakes, even if you prove that they are fake, they've still had an effect, a big effect as well.
Yeah, and in general, people are terrible for, like, once they've made their mind up about something, going back on it. I think
confirmation
it's that
bias as well.
Exactly, confirmation bias. You even if you prove something's wrong to somebody, like, they can make up excuses, they can come up with reasons, and that's the thing. In the documentary, it was a sort of closed environment where they told them afterwards what was going on. Out in the real world, you're going to be trying to convince people that that was a deepfake. And it's like, well, if someone believes it, then how are you going to convince them? Because what's going to convince them?
And I think you should just go back the line you said at the start. 23 of the 25 voted in line with what the algorithm and the deepfake videos pushed them to do. Now, okay, some of them might have voted that way anyway, but it was resounding. And I like I say, I don't know whether they picked a group of people who they felt were influenceable, but they didn't seem to be. I mean, there was a real pretty good range of people and they had different, political views and backgrounds. So yeah, it's fascinating. So what are we going to do? You said, let's tell people what to do. I mean, what's the answer, Jimmy?
I mean, I already try and do this anyway. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I'm not on social media very much. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm not on X. I don't go on Facebook anymore. I don't really spend any time on social media. I don't post on social media, and that's partly because I'm disillusioned with the whole thing. So, for me, like, I do watch a lot of factual stuff. I engage in a lot of that kind of thing. But for me, it's all about critical thinking. and always questioning everything that you see. And it's quite tiring, to be honest. Like, I can understand why people wouldn't want to do that, but the alternative is potentially being sold a lie at every corner.
Yeah. I actually think the best thing people can do for this, well, it's too late now for the UK election, would be to use your custom chat GPT, Jimmy. So maybe you can produce a custom one for the US election that will tell people which way to vote. And then they don't need to get drawn in by all of this deepfake disinformation.
When custom Claudes come out, I'll be all over it. But I tried to make a custom GPT, and I'll be honest, it was hot garbage.
Yeah. I mean, I think like just my last comment, I guess, and as I've said, I sort of admitted to people on here that I find it really difficult. The solution for me, I'm not saying I follow it all the time, but is to steer clear of social media as much as possible. And not necessarily all the time, but maybe, there are times like this when in the run up to something like this, to stay away from it and make a decision, based on policies. So I don't necessarily trust mainstream media. I don't trust fact checkers because I think fact checkers, the idea of a fact checker that's independent, nothing is independent. So I don't trust the premise of it. I think my fact check is me doing it myself. That's how I would trust it. But I think if you take the election, for example, that if you go on the Democratic Party or the Labour website and look at the manifesto, that is the policies, rather than believing a soundbite or a sound clip. And I would say, on some of those examples, they're going to charge £35 for a GP appointment. Well, you can quite easily look at the manifesto of whether that's what they're going to do. Now, this doesn't necessarily help with all deepfake stuff. I mean, the basic advice on that is going to have to be, like you said, take everything you can with more than just a pinch of salt, but take it with almost an assumption that it's not true unless you see it proven. But when you have specific circumstances like an election or, an event like that, you can look at policies from factual places that are not media in any way. I mean, I think that's the thing, is any media, any fact-checking website, any social media, anybody writing has their agenda. Of course, the Labour Party has its own agenda, the Democratic Party has its own agenda, the Republican Party has its own agenda, but you pretty much think that their manifesto is going to say what their policies are. That was one of the things that surprised me about this, is some of the announcements in the show, they're going to put the pension age up. Well, that would be in your manifesto. You could quite easily check that. It didn't seem like anybody went to check it. You don't have to go to media to check it. You can just look at the manifesto. So maybe asking everyone to check and read the manifesto in full is a lot to ask. But hey, I mean, that's kind of where we are, right? If you want to know the truth, you're going to have to get it from the horse's mouth. That's how you're going to have to get information. And we're going to end up, I think, in a world where you either make a kind of act of faith that you believe a source and then you're going all in on it, and that will have its own issues around, polarizing and echo chambers, or you're going to have to either believe things that you see for yourself, or just that you take that leap of faith that you're going to trust and believe. Because if you keep searching the information, you end up in a kind of spiral that just everything contradicts itself, and then you just don't know what to believe. And that's kind of where I've been for several months now.
Yeah, but I think with big things, I mean, I agree. I think with big things like elections, there are debates, there are things that are like published on I know you said you don't trust mainstream media, but I feel like there is, when they're publishing videos, when they're publishing live, live reports, things like that, and potentially debates and things like that. Like, there are sources that you can go to which you can trust. Now, I mean, I don't know in the future if that's going to change, but there are sources you can go to that you can trust, I think. And as you said, the manifestos themselves, I think when it comes to elections, everybody should be looking at manifestos and actually putting a bit of effort in my opinion. That's what I would do.
I should probably just say, when I say I don't trust mainstream media, my point is not that I don't trust any. My point is that I don't trust mainstream media in general, and therefore I have chosen my sources of mainstream media, which are then creating an echo chamber for me. So I kind of, I've created that, and I understand that. I used to be very much like, I used to read the Guardian website, and then I'd go and look at the Daily Mail website or the Daily Express, or, just to get an alternative view and just to kind of find somewhere in the middle. The problem is it's so extreme now, that you'd have to be all over the place. There is one good thing, and we're not advertising it because we're not getting any money for it. You need to watch the Sabine
Hoffen. Oh, you've put it on my head. Hoffelder or Hoffenfelder?
Hoffelder, something like that, on YouTube. I mean, it's funny, we watch her all the time, but can't remember her name. But one of the sponsors that she has at the end of the show is a sort of news website that you can click. You can kind of move this slider between right wing and left wing, and it will show you the same story.
Ground news.
Yeah.
Must be
Okay.
News. Yeah,
Ground news.
yeah.
So you can move it between right and left, and you can look at the same story, how it's being portrayed by right wing media and left wing media, and you can move the slider across. I think you need to subscribe and pay for it, which is why I haven't used it. But maybe, maybe something like that is the answer. So if you're listening and you work for that organization, then get in touch and we'll have you as a sponsor for the podcast.
And apologies to Sabine Hossenfelder for butchering her name.
Yeah, but we both watch your videos quite a lot, and we're both big fans. We just only knew your first name. So sorry, Sabine.
So on that note, thank you very much, Matt. I think we've had a great episode. We wanted to keep this one fairly short, as it's just a kind of quick update about this specific documentary that we watched and kind of the impact of it. So as always, we'll leave you with our song.
Ciao.
Sunak deepfake, Farage AI made, Trump bought army, Biden's not real, AI vote, who's real, AI vote, can't feel, Stormer glitch. Hologram.